earlier, we have the Schools Plus site coordinator and also the outreach person, so there's actually dedicated staff that do that work. So the teachers work with the Schools Plus sites, and the work that's being done there, of course, looks different in every Schools Plus site, but this is another area that we recognize will meet the needs of children that are having difficulty with their mental wellness. But we've included it in our curriculum. We have the framework. We're working with Dr. Stan Krucher, and we're training teachers, and that training will continue to go on. And also, it's that continual collaboration, that continual discussion on what we can do to meet the needs of our children, and we are in the middle of that work, and continue to do that through our framework and our Schools Plus site. Having it as part of the curriculum, and actually I've had the opportunity to actually look at the curriculum, and I'm going to look at Anne. Maybe, I know that our member opposite is very interested in this. I think it would be nice if you could actually see the curriculum that is now in the hands of our teachers and are in our schools. It is world class. I've actually talked with other ministers from other provinces around this being used, and I know it's being used in one of the it's in the Ontario school, the Ontario, Ottawa. So that's the framework that we're using. This is a very serious and important topic, and it's one of those topics that people are uncomfortable talking about sometimes if you or your family or one of your children has a mental illness. People will talk about ADHD, but they don't talk about depression. And also, it's the misinformation around mental illness. If a person is clinically depressed, and a teacher who doesn't know, or a parent who doesn't recognize, we want the best for our children, so we say, oh, come on, you know, pull your socks up, get on with it, which is actually making it worse and worse. So giving that through the Schools Plus site, education for the parents, education and partnership for teachers. But we are providing, well, not we, the Dalhousie group, the mental health team, is providing that robust in-servicing that I was able to I took a couple of hours in. Incredible intensive work, good work that's being done. And it's also interesting, as part of this work, is the voice of the young people who have issues around mental illness, who are speaking up and telling their story. And I think that is so important in any aspect of our lives, and when there's differences, is that personalized voice and the courage that young people have to step up and say, I have a mental illness that I am living with. I think there's some new ad campaigns out too that you're seeing some of our athletes that have clinical depression speaking about that publicly. And the more people that talk about it, then the more people that will get help. One of the worst things around mental illness is what I call self-medicating. So we have children that sometimes will start the road of drug usage to mask their own symptoms. And then we've started on another spiral of other issues. So as part of our education process too, we are also looking at making sure that children have the tools that they need at the appropriate grade levels around alcohol and drugs. It's very developmentally streamed throughout our system around prescription drug use, illegal drug use, and what it does to your body, and what to be mindful of. So we have a drug education in our schools, which does really need to go hand in hand with our mental health, because some of our students that are, I hate to use the word suffering from, but I don't know what word to use, because that's where I need the education on, that are living with a mental illness, sometimes will self-medicate and then end up having issues of drug and alcohol dependency, when the underlying problem has been a mental health problem at the very, very beginning. So now, having this framework in place, getting in there early, educating the families, and having the ability within our Schools Plus site, hopefully we'll see more of our children not getting caught up in drug addiction and alcohol problems, as we have seen. So we're working hard on that, and I have to say that I have nothing but the greatest respect and admiration for the teams of people that have been working on this framework, and especially Stan's team for the work that they're doing. And I will get that curriculum, which I've had the opportunity to go over, to you so that you can see the fine work that's being done in our schools. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Minister and staff for that presentation, I guess for want of a lack of a word. But I was really pleased to see the Minister is well versed in this area, and the department is actually moving into the curriculum area, because I know that the Ottawa program has proved exceptionally successful, and again, it's one of those areas, I guess, perhaps like the prescription pill issue that I thought was a very small problem, to be honest, until I became, again, educated on it and met with many people in the health field and associated community members dealing with this. So I'm very pleased to see that it is moving in this direction. I certainly, as a high school teacher, saw those signs of an early psychosis, and sometimes we would have a student that wouldn't be in school for 3 or 4 months, and we'd get you know, a note from home that experiencing an illness, and that's as broad as we got, when in fact we knew it was indeed a mental health issue. So I think in terms of public education, we know that this can interfere immensely with a child's potential, and unfortunately, it is sometimes again part of a very bright child's challenge is having strong mental health. So public schools, not just becoming aware, but having an action program is indeed commended, and I appreciate that response. The Minister is going to think I'm kind of moving around the surfaces and edges where I'm not talking about core curriculum and funding and so on, but again, having spent my professional life in the school system, we all know that, or many of us as educators, I think, still adhere to the model, the Socratic principles of, you know, sound mind and a sound body, and teaching to, in a holistic way, to a person. So, one of the areas that I've always been very, very interested in, and I know the Minister is aware that we have at least perhaps one model school in the school district where we both taught in terms of physical education and physical activity. I was wondering if the Minister could indicate what percentage of our children from P to 9. We know the struggle at the high school level. It doesn't in fact take anything away from the fact that perhaps we should be doing more in high school, but the fact is that the reality is it's very, very challenging. But what percentage of our children from P to 9 would be engaging in physical activity? Again, some recent studies, in fact, that are coming out are not just because of the deficits around inactivity of children compared to the previous generations, but also just the value of being physically fit and physically active and engaging on a daily basis, in fact, is another major asset to learning and having children prepared to gain the most from their 5 to 6 hours in public school. So I place a very, very important value on this, and I'd just like to get a little bit of an overview of that area.
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that, I guess, question viewpoint that you have. We share it. Before I start on answering the honourable member, I just would like to add another thing that I think we need to be proud of in Nova Scotia, that the mental health framework was actually piloted here in Nova Scotia before it went to Ottawa. We had 2 sites that it was piloted in, so it's another area of the province that showed leadership with Stan's team. So we incubated it here, and of course now we've adopted that. But as the member opposite is probably referring to, are you referring to maybe the school that I used to work in myself around the model for physical education?
Well, the current one would be, I think, Somerset.
Oh, Somerset? Okay.
Somerset, where the students have actually been tested.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I just would like to backtrack just a little bit. About a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago, I was at a CMEC meeting, Canadian Council of Ministers Education Canada in Ottawa, and our Minister of Health led a study that was conducted here in Nova Scotia on the activity levels of our children in school. And she gave me the opportunity to present to the ministers from across Canada the results from that particular data. And I'm going to tell you, it was, not only have I shared it with every minister across Canada, that data that was compiled here in Nova Scotia through the wellness side of health and wellness, I've shared it with ministers from around the world. We now know that children are only active when they get to a certain age. Now, this is the scary thing. They're only active when they are at school. The study gave the students an accelerator, I think it was called. They wore a little, it looked like a pedometer, but it covered more than that, and did heart rate and when they were resting in that, where a pedometer just counts your steps. And data was collected, and for nationwide based on the results that we had from all the different age groups. And what we're finding out is our children just aren't moving. Now, our elementary grades, kids are a little bit more active. Junior high, they start to decrease, but actually, if it wasn't for school, our high school kids, in most cases, a high percentage of our kids would be sedentary. Now, what's causing that is that, of course, screen time and those magic hours from school, after school till supper time, when kids get home from school, that time period, they're finding out that kids are engaging in many different things, and physical activity is not one of them, unfortunately. So in terms of obesity and health, if our kids aren't healthy, they're not going to learn. We know that there is a direct correlation between physical activity and how well your brain works. And there's a study actually being done right now, Dr. Reike's studies at Landmark East, and we've sent staff from the department as part of that to look at the work that they're doing. But that's intense physical activity throughout a school day. So this is on our radar, not only within the province of Nova Scotia, but nationally, that we have an epidemic on our hands. And the epidemic we have is our children are not fit. Our children are actually obese, and that is scary. So we have restricted funding, and that is one area. As I said earlier today, we have restricted funding around special education, but we do have restricted funding in our boards for healthy, active living, because it's important. We need to make sure that our children are moving. Now, there's lots going on in the Department of Health and Wellness and in education around strategies of children. We're collecting data right now on physical education in the schools. We don't know exactly what it looks like across Nova Scotia for every school board, every school. And you can't use individual as a model, because I worked at a school where we had daily physical activity. It was just part of our culture. We always had it. And I was actually quite surprised to find out that that wasn't the model across Nova Scotia, that children didn't get up and move for half an hour during the day, every day. It was the model that I was in. And of course, and I know the excellent leadership that Somerset School with Heather, I mean, she lives and breathes physical activity, and she recognizes the value, and it has to be a culture within the school. And how do we change a culture in our society where kids are not moving. Now, parents, when we ask parents about children moving, they actually think their kids are, because we've got children in soccer and hockey and, you know, those organized sports, but that's only a small percentage of our population. But even that, we're finding that the children are not actually engaged in continuous physical activity, because those are team sports where you don't play the full time. You sit and wait your turn, and some children don't get to play as often as other ones. So even families that value physical activity and have their children in a team sport, they're not reaching the activity level that they need for a healthy heart and a healthy mind. So this is very important. We're now doing a study across Nova Scotia on what physical activity and what every board is doing around the province, so that we can get that data, so that we can move forward on that. You don't need a gym in a school to be physically active, and I think sometimes communities feel that, well, we can't be doing physical activity because we don't have a gym. Well, you know, there wasn't a gym in the schools I grew up in, and we were outside playing and kicking balls. We need to teach children how to kick the ball. We need to make sure children have the ability to learn how to throw a ball, kick a ball, because there's so many things that you can do when you learn the proper skill, and it's not, some people need to learn the special skill of that. So we value physical education specialists teaching the skills. Now, I talked about that time between school, the end of the school day, and when children are home with their families as being problematic. We have recognized that, so we brought in the community use of school grant. So there is a cost involved for the community to use a school, which could be janitorial. It could be to provide an instructor. It could be, you know, transportation for the children, especially in a rural area, to get from the school home, because if they don't get on their bus, so providing transportation. We've looked at all of every way that we can to have the building, our physical plant being utilized as much as we possibly can, and the barrier around that was money. So we've provided the community use of school grant. That's not in that's a separate grant. It's not in our budget. It's not in it's part of our Kids and Learning First. And what we've provided, that grant actually is distributed to each of the 8 school boards, and community groups then ask the school board for the funding. They don't have to come to the department. That money's been allocated. I had the opportunity to step into Port Williams one afternoon, and there was a group of children with a coordinator doing physical activity. And that is the kind of things that we are encouraging communities to do, to use our buildings to keep our kids fit, keep them active. And I know that we have also grants through Justice, because as you know, if children are engaged in physical activity, they're going to be not engaging in other things that they can get themselves into trouble. So it's very important. Physical activity is very important. We're working on that collaboratively with the Department of Health, Wellness, and Justice sits at the table, and also Community Services to make sure, and Labor and Advanced Education, looking at ways that we can move forward as a province to provide the very best abilities for our children to be healthy. And the way we do that, of course, is encouraging healthy eating too. We're way out in front with our food guide here in our food policy here in Nova Scotia, and also looking at daily physical activity. So we're doing a study right now of our phys ed in our schools, so that we can base our move forward on documentation, on data. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I did receive the broad picture there in terms of where we are and where we need to go around having children with stronger physical and more active lives, both in school and out of school. It's interesting that in some of the Scandinavian countries, by the time children do get to high school, daily physical activity is well ingrained. When students came to our school as foreign students, they wouldn't be coming out for some of the sports teams, perhaps unless it was the hockey program where they needed to find a place to play. But when you ask them about coming out for teams, they'd very often say, well, I go to the gym every day, or I do such and such a workout. So it becomes very much part of their daily life, and we're still a long way, I guess, from that kind of cultural move. But I believe the school indeed is an important place. The minister did tip exactly where I was going with the next question. And I know we've moved, along the path of healthy snack and lunch programs. And again, what children are eating are critical to how well they're going to learn, and also behavioral factors can also be dietary related. And so we have made strides here, and I know most of our schools now have a breakfast program because, again, that is the central meal for really for all of us, is to have a good breakfast, a good start to the day. And I saw how that changed children in our school when probably the school where I taught for many years, when we first introduced it. And children who often came to school without anything at all and kind of hung on until recess to then sometimes get something from a friend to get them through till noon hour. And so it has changed, and now we want to move to the next level whereby they aren't just putting something in their bodies, but rather they're putting healthy snacks. And I brought this up with the Minister of Agriculture because it is obviously related to the school snack program and using local consumption and so on where possible. But I have heard from a couple of principals, and the last one I heard from was somebody I think the minister would know, Mr. Carl West, who was at Annapolis East Elementary. And he said children are, opting for now what he considers the alternate snack, and whatever it, cookies or whatever it may be, because fruit and vegetables are indeed expensive. I'm wondering if the department assists schools financially and also in terms of what may be available as healthy snacks, or is this left to the discretion of central office and local boards?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, is making sure that our children in the province are eating properly. And what we really are working on too is as a shift in our culture. The member opposite mentions about children arriving in our school system from Scandinavian countries, and it's just part of their culture. I had the opportunity to be in Norway for a week with the OECD and meeting with ministers from all over the world, and had the opportunity to see that they actually do spend most of their time outside. It's the exact same climate as we have here in Nova Scotia, but they're outside. They're dressed appropriately, and on Sundays, everyone takes their children out for a walk. It's the parks are filled, the streets are filled. Everyone, after they have their lunch, they're outdoors. So it's a culture, and how do we're going to have to start moving and providing opportunities, I guess, through education or by role model on how we can move in that direction. Now, the question around do we provide funding, or what we do at the department through health and wellness, there is they provide $750,000 on a yearly basis for schools, breakfast program, and we at the department cost share a breakfast program coordinator. But as you know, there's many local partnerships within schools. I know that in the school that I taught, we had a breakfast program for all children, and the Royal Bank took us on as their as part of their day, they would come up to the school and offer their time an hour in the morning greeting children and with our breakfast program. They not only supported it financially in partnership with our school, but they all supported it physically by coming up and working an hour before they went into the bank just down the street. So there's lots of partnerships. I know that's the one I had in mind, but I have to say that the school that the member opposite used to be the principal of, their breakfast program was actually so well received that I actually heard complaints from parents that students purposely didn't eat breakfast at home because it was so good, because they really took it on as welcoming everybody. And that's a good thing because, of course, it was so good that students felt that they were not only getting a nutritious breakfast, but they were also having fellowship before the day started. But, you know, I know there was a great deal of leadership provided at your school when we were in the beginning stages of recognizing that we need to have a coordinated way of reaching the students that were coming to school with empty stomachs. Because when a child arrives at school and they've got an empty stomach, they can't learn. And if all they can think about is when recess is going to come so they can eat a bag of chips, and then that bag of chips is the only fuel they have, that learning is not going to be where it needs to be for that student. They're behind the 8 ball before the day is over. They're losing ground. So having our guidelines about healthy snacks and healthy eating, what we offer in our cafeterias, is taking time. There's a bit of a resistance for children's palates to adjust to healthy eating, but you know, pushing it and continuing on and being steadfast on this is we're actually seeing the results. I know over in Port William School many years ago, it was a community group, and I remember Ismay Bly was part of that, and I'm trying to think of some other, there's some people that provided leadership. I don't know, was that 15 years ago maybe? Yes. About 15 years ago. A group of nutritionalists and dedicated parents worked at Port William School to provide food that children were not normally eating at snack time. The celery sticks, the grapes, the apples, carrot sticks, and parents came in and provided that on a daily basis. And that nucleus of that work that was done that many years ago has spread across the province. I know that there was a great deal of work to work on a framework for healthy eating and what that involved, because what we're doing is we're actually shifting what children are offered coming through a cafeteria line in our schools. And as you know, there's nothing better than a hot dog or a plate of French fries or the greasy pizza. You get accustomed to those flavors, and the next thing you come in through the line, there's no more hot dog. It's a nutritious alternative, which is pizza made differently. It's chicken fingers that are broiled, not deep fried. French fries, sometimes I know some schools went from in the deep fryer to the oven ones, but you know, providing these alternatives it was a little bit of a learning curve, especially whole wheat in the bread as opposed to just the regular adding whole grains in, providing the fruit. There was a lot of learning on how do we do this for our young people that they will eat it and find it as not only an alternative, but that's what they're going to choose. So schools have done a lot of work. I have seen, and that's the nice thing, I think, over time, I have seen a real shift in what children choose to eat because the model's there in place, because a group of parents and nutritionalists and educational leaders persevered and just kept at it, and to make sure, because the bottom line that they were looking at, healthy children. And if we don't provide the service in our schools as a role model, then where are they going to learn it? So there's now across the province, we have very strong guidelines for healthy eating. And it was nice to see, I think it was a year ago, that even the hospital cafeteria made a change. You know, there's always a time and a place for a hot dog at a fair and some French fries, maybe when you're at the rink watching a hockey game. In moderation, it's great. But in a school system, when they're there for learning, we need to make sure that we're providing them those nutritious foods. So a lot of work has been done over the years. The leadership role that was taken with Ismay Bly and that group of dedicated parents from Port Williams. Now, one of the components that a number of people, and I know that the member opposite is aware, there's a dedicated group of people in the Annapolis Valley that have been working on buy local, and I know that that is a province-wide initiative, but how we can connect our local products in our schools. We have some leadership from our young farmers. Patricia Bishop is one that has provided leadership around the local food, and she supplies food from her farm directly into Port Williams. We're seeing those symbiotic relationships between the farmer and the schools. Now, of course, as you know, coming from the Annapolis Valley, we have the benefit of geography and living in the breadbasket of Nova Scotia that is probably easier, but there's ways that we can facilitate getting our local product in the school system and having children wanting to eat local product. I keep hearing over and over again that it's more expensive to eat healthy. And I have to say that I don't agree. I will push back on that every single time. And we've done a cost analysis. I taught lower elementary for years, and we've done a cost analysis with nutrition, nutritional value, and cost with a number of snacks that children bring to school. And if you look at the cost of an apple in Nova Scotia, you have got the biggest bang for your buck. The child is not only getting hydrated by eating an apple at lunchtime, it's biodegradable. You're not throwing any paper away with it. So you can eat a healthy snack for a lower cost than bringing a bag of chips or Vachon cakes, especially to school. So I think we need to kind of shift that you can actually eat healthy for cheaper, because we just need to have children recognize that carrots and turnips and all of those things are actually quite delightful if they're just part of your normal routine and not looked at as extras, and children will pick that up. I'm have a 5-year-old grandson, and I have to say that I never see him eat anything coming from those bags anymore, because his mother has taken it upon herself to make sure that what goes in his body is used for fuel. And if you put junk in, you get junk out. So you've got good stuff going in, good stuff going out. So we want to make sure that those brain cells are revved up by good food in all of our children in Nova Scotia. So we're working on that. And the Department of Agriculture has been doing an awful lot of work around community breakfast and supporting buying local, and looking at the nutritional value of our food, especially looking at the nutritional value of our grass-fed beef in Nova Scotia. We're making shifts slowly, and I think that we have an opportunity in Nova Scotia to continue to lead the pack in doing the work we're doing in our school system. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I did want to touch on a couple of areas that before my time is up that I'd like to hear the Minister and the Department expound on some. There is no question that from a whole lot of different perspectives, we know that when our students graduate, when they leave school in Nova Scotia, too high a percentage do not have the capabilities to go on to university math, in some cases math at community college, no matter what the program offering and some of the level of math that new career path that our young adults, our students are on. So it is a great concern, and I know this is not a problem unique to Nova Scotia, many other jurisdictions as well. But my own personal finding and view, and maybe the Minister shares this, because I had the opportunity to evaluate every math teacher on a staff. And we know that nothing has changed in 2012. There are math teachers who are a week or two ahead of their students. That's the reality. That's a tough piece, I know, for parents probably to hear. But I had to share that with parents, to be honest with them, because we know that the difference between a good math teacher and somebody who happens to have the math course to teach can be a world apart. And I was a perfect student for that. Going into a grade 12 math class taught by somebody like Gary Darris, and an advanced math a concept, and that by the end of the class, and if he gave me a problem, I was now able to do that. But a teacher who didn't have quite that same adeptness and love, and who could literally get inside math and impart it to students, that teacher students weren't coming out nearly as prepared. So we have across the board, you know, I don't think the well-trained full complement of teachers. We know there are great math teachers in the system, but I'm wondering, where is the plan to say in 10 years' time our math students will in fact be doing better? Because the foundations should be better. We should know by junior high. This is what I hear. I think the grade 10 moving from 12 to 10 to test is sound. I like the idea of knowing in junior high where your students are. We could then recommend, look, you can do math, but it's taking a little longer for you to learn the concept. Therefore, you should be perhaps taking math year long. There are many teachers who will tell us that there's some concepts that do need the drill, that they just don't happen by osmosis. And some students should go through high school taking year-long math every year. So, and in fact, even some good students who have to rush through too many concepts, too many outcomes, through their semestered course in particular, often struggle. And you know, I think when there is a good math teacher in the classroom, and I hear of one this year at the grade 10 level in my old school, who in fact has taken very weak math students, and they're talking about how much they enjoy math this year, how much they are learning, and the objective results are there for the proof. And I think we have to do that on a much larger scale than what we currently do. And I'm wondering, Madam Minister, you know, what are some of the pathways that you see to achieve better results? Because we use math a lifetime, and many go into careers where, gosh, I didn't realize I needed a strong high school math, and all of a sudden that discovery is there as they get into community college or university.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for your thoughts on this very, very important area. We need to make sure and ensure that our students are graduating Nova Scotia schools with a firm foundation that gives them wings to go into any career that they wish. And right now I'm hearing, and I'm hearing from industry, I'm hearing from universities, and I'm hearing from a lot of parents that our students are not graduating where they need to be. It is imperative that we make sure that we are providing the appropriate curriculum. And as you know, with the Kids and Learning First plan, that we are now, the work has already started, we'll be working with teachers to primary 1 and 2 and grade 10 into next year to work with the teachers, the professional development that's required when you're shifting gears. And the shifting gears is to move away from a lot of outcomes to make sure the outcomes that are being taught are the deep foundational outcomes that a child needs that they can build on, and taught at an age-appropriate level. Because if you're teaching children a concept too early, they just don't have the developmental ability to be able to internalize it. So they might be able to parrot it or move it, but they don't. And I say move, like they can move things and show us things, but they don't have a deep understanding. By the time they make to the next grade, it has to be retaught again because they didn't get it at the right time. So the revamping of the whole system to the Western Protocol is the answer to the foundational work that we're doing to ensure our students are going to get the math that they need so that they have every door open to them at the end of grade 12. You brought up the issue of teachers in our system that are teaching children and they're 1 week ahead. Well, I know that if you don't have a good understanding of a math concept, and if you can't impart of that knowledge appropriately with your students, the students are not going to get a good education. One of the things that we need in our system is not only a teacher with an expertise in math, and that is a specialized pre-work that you have, like in your post-secondary, and it might be even if you go outside and do your work with a master's program around math. If you have that expertise, your students benefit. Now, I've worked with some of the best math teachers that anyone could ever meet. I worked with Lois Boudreau at my school, and I used to walk the hall, and I used to stand outside our windows and our door to watch while she taught a math class. And I'm telling you, she created goosebumps on your arms because she loves math, and she imparted that love and passion for math to the children in that classroom. And I've talked with her about that, and she goes, I just love math. That's what we want. We want a teacher that not only has deep subject understanding, we want a teacher that loves math to be able to invigorate our students. Now, junior high, can you imagine the gift that she's given to all those children at that junior high in her expertise over the years? She now works with, she's one of our math mentors and working with students, working with teachers, which is really good, but boy, you should see her teach. I'm telling you, she's a class act when it comes to teaching. We have found with our research and from our data that we've collected that only 37% of our teachers that are teaching math at the high school level have a background in math. We need to change that. We need to work together with the Nova Scotia Teachers Union to make sure that the teachers have that background, that expertise, are the ones in the front of the classroom. And as the honourable member knows, thank you. As the honourable member knows, due to the collective agreement, the way that's structured, seniority, our teachers that have the expertise in math, especially our new graduates that are coming out with that have that background, sometimes don't get to teach the class that they have the best fit with because of seniority. And I've heard this from teachers. You know, if you're 1 week ahead of your class in history, you know, I think that it can be fairly manageable, I suppose. It's not the most it's not what we want to see, but boy, in math, you need to know it inside out and upside down because math is so foundational. You need to have that good structure. So as part of the Kids and Learning First, you will have noticed that I've actually put on there's a part in there that we need to work with the Nova Scotia Teachers Union around creating standards. We need to do something to make sure that we are getting the teachers that have that background in the right place. Now, one of the things that we're doing too within the province, we have principals involved in instructional leadership courses right now. And what the principals are now doing, they're learning skills on how they can be in the school the instructional leader. So we're asking principals that are taking this to be cognizant of, now I know that the member opposite was a principal, so I know, and I've been in that position myself, there's a lot that a principal does. And sometimes that instructional part can fall to the bottom as opposed to all the other things that you manage. But we have to recognize that the principal is the instructional leader in the school, needs to be aware of the teacher's strengths and where teachers need support, and also make sure that the teachers then that are showing that they need some support provide those teachers opportunities. So we're looking at discussions with and work with the Nova Scotia Teachers Union around how we can work through a standard in place so a teacher that is now teaching a course has the background, expertise, and experience to match the course they're being asked to teach. Because as one knows, a teacher in our system can go from a primary to a grade 12. There's nothing stopping us. We need a standard in place so that if a teacher does move from one grade level to another or subject area to another, that they have the expertise to do that, and that can be done with summertime institutes or training, or it can be that they already have in their back pocket an expertise in maybe chemistry or physics. And those are the areas that you really need to have that strong skill to impart that passion that I've seen in many math teachers. And I look at Therese Forsyth, who, people that love math. They do such a good job in teaching it. So we have instructional leadership undergoing to provide principals the skills that they need to make sure that they're instructional leaders within their school. We are working with the Nova Scotia Teachers Union on how we can formulate standards so that we can get around this very serious situation that the honourable member has brought up on making sure that our teachers match what class they're teaching. And also, we are working right now on providing a different model, a different program of math in our province that will teach children a strong foundation. We moved the grade 12 out provincial exam into grade 10 to provide us the opportunity to check in with the student to see where they are, where they need to go in math, what we need to do in the department. We didn't need that at grade 12, which was then a mark. We need it at grade 10 so we can help evaluate, support, and do what we need to do in the department. You bring up a very important topic. There's nothing more dear to my heart than making sure that we're providing opportunities for our students to excel when they leave our school system.
I recognize the honourable member for Kings West with 6 minutes remaining.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And possibly the last question I will get in. And I was pleased to hear the Minister this morning state unequivocally that her belief and what she will do as a minister, what she did as a teacher to support inclusion. And it definitely is very, very much in line with my view of education, of society, and of course the area that we all know that our province has struggled with since the concept has been brought in as fundamental to how we practice or how we approach education in the province, how we structure it, how we support it, and so on. I believe generally we've had a lot of deficits around giving inclusion the best chances to work. And so as we look at cuts to the system and looking to protect the programs we have and offer the great individualized programs and instruction for our youth, I wonder if we're going to be able to maintain even what I would say is an acceptable level of inclusion, but perhaps we are not meeting the best model and the best way that we should be practicing in inclusion. So I'm wondering, if in fact the Minister and the Department see a tension between making sure that inclusion gets the very best support through human resources, through the resources in the classroom, and especially, working to equip all of our classrooms, for example, with a smart board. And I see how teachers are able to capitalize on that technology and reach students who before, would not maybe engage in getting up in front of a class, but they got those immediate supports and they can quickly click on a mouse and the material they need for their math applications and so on is right in front of them. But as we know that our classrooms today are enormously diverse, and as I sat in my granddaughter's class this year in French immersion primary, and I look at whether there was even another 2 or 3 students in that class, And then I go down the hallway and there's 27 in a primary class, and next year potentially 29. And looking at the challenges that primary teacher is dealing with, and to have limited assistance to reach each child. That is the dilemma that I see, whether it be a parent, a grandparent, an educator, and I think that's what we're going to be hearing about in the coming weeks and months and years, that perhaps with the tremendous needs, and we talked about mental health today, we talked about food, proper nutrition, we talked about physical activity and all these things, but at the end of the day, if we are not reaching a child, giving him those early skills for success, then we may not have that desired, capable, successful student at the end. I know the minister's got very little time, and I did want to hear a response, so I'll stop there.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. You do know my passion, the member opposite knows my passion on how firmly supportive I have of our inclusive model in Nova Scotia. And I have to tell you, it breaks my heart when I've been in other areas where they don't share our philosophy. To me, I find it mind-boggling, but I know my time is limited, so I just want to make a comment on the primary piece and children in the class, and can we meet the diverse needs in the class. The curriculum for primary was changed a number of years ago to meet the needs of our youngest students coming into school. It's not the primary curriculum that it used to be. It's much more play-based. It's not as academic as our primary used to be. It's moved into a play and group model. Play is actually work for little people. It's actually what they do is to learn, is to play. And some children, we're getting studies on children with autism, how important it is for parents to learn how to play with their children and to get the right responses from children. But work for children is play. And so the curriculum, I just want to say that the curriculum in primary meets the needs of children that from that almost 5 to 5-year-olds that are coming into school. One of the things that we need to do as a province is to track, to make sure that we're meeting the needs, because over the years, we haven't had the ability to get all of the information that we need. So with the program in school, we'll be able to now have much more data to see what the numbers are in our school system. We do have many things in place in our school. We have specialists for students with special needs, but one of the things is that we're on that, there's a lot of work that I've seen myself, but we're continuing to work on, and you mentioned this with the smart board, is assistive technology and meeting the needs through assistive technology for our students to include them. You heard me mention probably early bliss symbols, which the cardboard and pieces and matching. Now children that have autism or other developmental delays are actually using iPads in schools for communication devices. We have much more that we can offer our students. At one time, our inclusive model was including children in the classroom, but we weren't interacting with them maybe the best we could. But now with assistive technology, children can be much more engaged in actually the curriculum and also engaged in communication back and forth with their peers, which is so important. So technology is just amazing, and it's very good to be at a time where we're seeing technology meeting the needs of our students. So we are working continually on how we best can meet the needs of our students. We are going to track that. We're going to make sure that we have evidence-based work. Interestingly, over the years, before we used the term autism, we didn't have the word. We were dealing with children in our school system that we didn't have. We didn't have an understanding of what the neurological. Remember, at one time, and I know that I'm looking over at it's lovely talking to both of us as educators. Remember, they used to blame the mother if a child had autism. And now we recognize it's neurological, and we have been doing a lot of work within the department around autism and around actually the province. And we're a province that offers, before children come to school, we have early intervention with every child in the province that's been diagnosed with autism gets the supports they need. Before we came to government, that did not happen. It was a system placed that some children got it and some children didn't. Under the leadership of our Minister of Health and Wellness, every child in the province that is diagnosed with autism does get the support. So getting in early is important. So children with autism, by the time they come to school, we already have some transitional pieces in place. We're going to be continuing to collect data with the in-schools so that we can be flexible and nimble and coordinate appropriately the resources that schools have. We have an IPP process, which I know that maybe the member opposite wouldn't have been in the system, but that's been revamped. It looks much different. It's not as onerous as it used to be. It's a much more user-friendly and a collaborative team approach to providing a plan for a student that has special needs. And I always go back to one of the key members of that team is the parent, because no one knows their child better than the parent. And it's so important we work collaboratively. The IPP is planned in that way. So we have lots of things happening in the department. We have an office within the Department of Education, the Department for Student Services, with people that have a great deal of expertise with children with special needs, learning disabilities. We have an autism coordinator works within the department. They're dedicated, they're working with school boards, and also they're working with individual situations that come up because, you know, every case is a little bit different, and sometimes we have to do some very creative analysis of ways that we can provide service for all of our students. And that was the formulation, too, of the tuition support program, recognizing that we can't meet the needs of every student, but we came up with a partnership model for that. So we're going to continue to work. We are, as a province, so lucky to have a culture, a society that recognizes that everyone needs to be included.
The time allotted for the official opposition has expired. I now recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a few, I hope, simple little questions to finish up what I'd like to understand about some of the things going on in the education system. The first one, Minister, is I've known, I've heard, and we've spoke about cell phones in the classroom, and I know you're not a fan of banning the cell phones, as the report says, because some teachers I know use those cell phones as a teaching tool. And I've spoke to some that really think it's good. I spoke to some that really think it's bad. I know we have rules against cell phones here in the House. During question period, cell phones are not on. My question is, are there going to be rules made up so that the teachers who need to use these tools can use them, and we can teach children the proper use of the cell phones, as in on the desk, on vibrate. If it leaves the desk, it's got to leave the classroom, type of things like that.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to clarify my comments. I am not a fan of banning, because I'll just give you an interesting comment I heard when I was with a group of people in discussion around, there's a movie, Bully, that has come out in the United States, and it's now here in Canada. And unfortunately, when the movie was edited, there's some words in it that are racist, and also swear words in it. And so the system in the United States rated it R. And so I actually was talking with one of the producers at one of the functions I went on anti-bullying workshop that I was in when I was in New York. And they said that it was a gift to the movie to have it rated R, because now more students will watch the movie. when you think about it, if you remember back far enough to when we were young, if it was forbidden fruit, then you'll find a way to get at it. So you remember that. If you ban something, it becomes, then the issue is the ban. It becomes problematic. And I asked a number of students, I said, if you knew that a cell phone was banned, what would you do? And they said they'd sneak it. So then what we're doing is creating a system by which children are going to be having their cell phones at school, but then sneaking them, and then so we've added another component on. Anyway, banning is never the appropriate tool to use around these kinds of issues. What the best thing we can do is educate around a cell phone and cell phone use. So we're on side on making sure we know about cell phone use and how we roll that out. Now, if the Department of Education did a ban, that would be punitive for many classrooms in the province that use cell phones as part of their curriculum. I've had a lot of emails on this, and I think that it's because we're in the 21st century, and 21st century learning is different. There is a teacher at Horton that has it's a class where they learn video and communication and all that, and so he'll give them an assignment, and they take their smartphones out, they take pictures, then they come back, they do a multimedia. They're using their cell phones as for their project work. They're mobile. Cell phones aren't phones anymore. There's enough power in a cell phone now than there was when we sent the first person to the moon. Just that cell phone is much power in them in terms of computer strength and technology in our cell phone. So in every school board and in every school, they have policies associated with cell phone use. Some schools have a ban on them, and that's their right, especially if it's an elementary school and they feel that they're disruptive and children are at a developmental level to carry the phone. Some schools have an overall, I've talked with lots of children out in the community. In junior high and high school, different schools have different policies, but it comes down to around a cell phone, it is up to each school to design their policy around the appropriate use of the technology that children bring to school. Because they're not only bringing to school smartphones, cell phones, they're bringing iPads, iPods, etc. So every school has the ability. One of the strongest things that we can do, that's not the word that I want, but you know, one of the most powerful things that we can do around this technology is to provide students the appropriate education around appropriate use of cell phone. So around cyberbullying could be taking place in a school setting from a cell phone, but we have no control over what is happening outside the school. Children will have that technology, but it is up to each and every school to set their own policy. There are a number of schools in the province. I just mentioned a school at Horton, but I know here in Halifax there's a number of schools that have their cell phones as part of the curriculum. I know there's GPSs on cell phones, there's calculators on cell phones. I mean, I'm not an expert on all of what a cell phone can be used for other than a phone and texting. But children do use them for there's applications, especially the iPads have a number of educational applications which are just phenomenal. So I'm not a fan of banning, but I'm not, and that's a polarizing. There's going to people will agree with me and people that are not going to agree with me. The safety of our students is paramount to me, and we need to handle and tackle this issue of bullying and cyberbullying. And I think that we don't want to get caught up in a furor over a ban. I feel that schools set their policy, and they know their students, and the policy set at the school. Some teachers also have policy within their classroom, and it's up to the teacher. But the best rules that are ever made in a school are rules that are made in collaboration with the user themselves. Because if I was a classroom teacher and I said, no phones, then students have told me, then they would find a way to sneak them. But if the classroom all met together, discussed the issue, talked about the pros and the cons, and then came up with a collaborative approach to how they're going to handle cell phones, and they make a rule about, in their a collaborative way of making the rule in the classroom, they will honor that rule, because it'll be peer challenged at that point, because, oh no, we made this rule. So that is the best rules that are made with the children, the user themselves, about the appropriate use of the technology in the class. And I've been hearing from some superintendents too that where cell phone use is used as part of the curriculum, and it's been extremely successful. So those are my comments, a few comments on smartphones, cell phones in classrooms. Thank you.
Recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you. You talked earlier about criteria for building a new school. I wonder if you could have or table the criteria for me on the criteria of new school: size, number of students, just the criteria that you would have if I came to you and said I want a new school in North Sydney. Could I have that criteria to say what would I have to achieve, or what would I need as an area to build that school, or to have that school into consideration? I was wondering if you could just table that for me.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. The first thing that happens is that the school board determines the need. We're asking it with the Kids and Learning First plan, we're asking school boards to look at their schools regionally. So looking at a school individually and putting it on a school review is a process. It takes a year and causes a lot of angst in the community. But we're asking with the Kids and Learning First for school boards to look at schools regionally, and that model is being worked on in the department, and one of the school boards has been using that model, and we're using their leadership on this. So a year or two out, maybe 3 years out, a region of the province would look at demographics, look at the schools, looking at enrollments, all of those things would be looked at with the community. So you would be looking at what is happening in the community, with the community, and looking at options and opportunities that schools can be used for. In some cases, our schools have gone past their due date. And school boards know their schools and will say, oh, you know what, if we did a renovation or an alteration in this school, it's going to cost $7 million. But if we have 2 schools moved to here, it could be 11. Like, what do we want? Do we want to renovate a school? Do we want a new school? I mean, all of those things are taken into consideration. Once the school board determines that a new school, they would like to have a new school built, then there is a call from the school board. Well, first they come to the Department of Education on a priority, and we say, yes, you do need a new school, and let's get started on this. And we say, we've approved that they need a new school. Then the school board, each of them have a process in place to identify where the school is going to be built. Once that process takes place, the school boards are required to submit 3 sites to the Department of Education, and at that point, those 3 sites then are evaluated by engineers from TIR, environmental, I think the environment department is involved, but they look at the site. Many things are looked at. Is it safe? Is it in a floodplain? Is it, how much would it cost to clear the site? You know, all those issues are taken into consideration. Then when they do an analysis, then the sites come, then the department looks at it again, and then it comes actually to my office, and with recommendations to which one would be the most appropriate site. And it's all in a report. So, for example, I just received a report from a school selection site, and TIR's engineers and environmental, it came back that one for safety reasons and one for environmental reasons, too close to fumes from an asphalt area. They weren't appropriate sites for a school, so they're back to the drawing board. But after that's done, so we now know where the site is going to be. Engineers work on how many students are going to be housed at the school, what grade it is. The site itself is determining the design, and there is a formula by how many square feet per child takes and what a classroom size, and especially now with project learning. I will ask the department if that, I know it's a formula, but I don't know if it's in a document or if it's inside. See, these things nowadays don't look like this. It's actually, I have to tell you, it is mind-boggling to see this process. They're in huge, the design process are in huge books, page after page, and everything. I have a great deal of respect for engineers. I mean, really, it is unbelievable that the analysis and work that's done in the planning of a school. But to get to that, I know it's all in computer. So what I'll have to ask the department if they could provide it in some sort of form, because I've talked with engineers a number of times, and they talk in numbers about square feet, but the design process is amazing, and it's really it's kind of neat to be with the engineers when they're doing this, because they really love their work. And I think that they actually like when there's a challenge involved with their work, that they have to then do a little bit of problem solving and change things. So it is a huge, big, involved process, and it's part of the education part has a component in that, making sure that they're built as educational institutions, but the work falls with transportation and infrastructure renewal. So I will ask if we can have our facilities manager to provide you that kind of, we're not going to give you the computer program. You would probably have too much fun.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
I know in the throne speech they talked about moving some departments outside of the Metro Halifax area. Has there been any discussions about moving any part of the education department outside of Metro?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Well, actually, the Department of Education is throughout Nova Scotia. The office sits in Halifax, but the people aren't necessarily in the office. A lot of the people that work in the Department of Education are actually out in Nova Scotia doing work in schools or with school boards. So at this point, there's no talk of the Department of Education's office moving from Halifax, because basically the Department of Education, there's very few people actually, if you're walking through, there's a lot of people outside of the department, outside doing work in the schools. If you're walking by the African Nova Scotia section, I'm lucky if I'm going to see anybody in the office, and because they're out in schools. If I walk by our Mi'kmaq coordinator's office, Candy is probably in a school community doing work. Our people are out so sometimes people don't come into the office, and I'm looking at Ann. Sometimes we don't see them for weeks at a time actually housed in the office, because they're out in schools doing the work. So our office is a little bit different, where the work that the Department of Education does goes from one tip to the other tip and side to side of the province, and especially with technology today, that is available, we've been doing a lot of teleconferencing and Skyping and doing a lot of work in that way. So we're kind of already in the community that way, so that we haven't had any discussions about moving space, because basically we're there.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Just a couple little more questions. You talked about the new hog formula being decided upon amongst a large group of people. Was there a committee involved in that, and what was the makeup of the committee?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you for the question. I have to say, when I stood up over a year ago and said that we would look at the formula, I told the superintendents that we would look at the formula because of all 8 school boards, every school board had some sort of criticism of how it affected them. So there wasn't one school board that liked it. And it was creating some problems. It never, I guess, Mr. Hogg, it was a good formula, but it just didn't meet the needs. It needed some tweaking. We didn't know that that's what we needed at the time, but Doug Stewart and Frank Dunn traveled the province and met with school boards and the senior staff. They had 24 meetings with boards, senior staff, and elected members, and I hope Mr. Hogg doesn't think I'm critical of his formula, and with Bill Hogg himself on this. I happened to see the work that was being done because Doug and Frank would have meetings with me and talk about what concerns school boards were having. One of them is that when the school board received their allocated budget through the Hogg formula, it had restricted funding for certain things, and it didn't provide boards flexibility. So we do still have some restricted funding, but what we've done is taken out the restricted funding. There's been many aspects of the formula that have changed. We've added the transportation allocation has changed, and how that is how that goes through the formula. I know we've added in to the formula small and isolated schools. You've heard me mention that. And this is another one of those, and I've asked a number of times of how it works, because when I ask a question, they're able to give me an answer in a fairly short amount of time, but it's a computer program with, but a person has to input all of the data. So it was a lot of work. So there wasn't a committee per se. What it was senior staff, elected school boards, but I know that Doug and Frank worked with the financial, what's CFOs, like the Stu Jamesons of school boards, and worked on this. And then after, they got it to a certain point, then they went back and had everyone look at it again to see if this is the formula. Now, because it's Bill Hogg's formula that has revisions and tweaking and it's modified, it's going to take a couple of years. You think about 3 years. We're not going to just put the formula in place because it would cause some hardships for boards. So we're transitioning it over a 3-year period so that school boards will be funded through the full revised modified formula in about 3 to 4 years time. But we've started the transition this year. So answer, wasn't a committee, it was a team and a team approach and 24 meetings. And I know more than that with phone calls and back and forth. And then after, I'm just going to ask Frank, how many months did that take? It was, I know you were spent all summer. We started in July, finished about 6 months of dedicated work on that. I know that during the summer, they were out in the field and went right to the boards and worked right in the offices with staff. I know hours and hours and hours were spent in response to the plea from the boards to look at the formula. So when we started, we didn't know if it was going to be a new formula. So Bill Hogg's work is sound, just required some tweaking based on feedback from the boards.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Was there opportunity for the public or the teachers to have any say in this, to be consulted?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
No, this is a formula that was designed with the department and with the financial folks at each of the boards, but the elected boards were definitely involved in this part.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Last question. And it's probably, anyway, last question. If we're here and we have fewer students and we have our funding formula because of that, but we also have more teachers, should our student-to-teacher ratio not go down because of that?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I'll answer the question, but I didn't quite get the answer. The question and what you want me. Well, I'll
Perhaps the,
yeah. Okay, I can try to answer it, and it might get to the point that what you're asking, what we're looking at. We're looking at declining enrollment throughout Nova Scotia. We do have some boards that are gaining students, and hopefully with Ship Start here, we might see some growth in our populations in some areas of the province. But based on all of the forecasts that we have, we're going to have declining enrollment till 2020. That's when it looks like it's going to even off. We are going to make sure that the ratio, we keep a low ratio like we have. Right now we have 3 years ago it was 12.8. Last year was 12.9. This year it is 12.9. I don't know the ratio because we won't know those ratios till the school year starts for next year. But based on the allocation, we will continue to keep our class size low and our ratio low. Now, the ratio that I talk about, and it was interesting, there was a letter that was tabled around this. Ratio is people in the system, children in the system, and that ratio. That's a ratio. That is historically how Department of Education has talked about numbers. But I've never said that was class size. So if you take out the administrators out of that mix, administration, I think the ratio is 14-7 or something like that. But those aren't the numbers that the general public want to hear. They want to hear what's an average class size in Nova Scotia. So in the elementary, now if you wouldn't mind getting those numbers because I don't want to misquote them. The provincial average for elementary schools, the provincial average is 21.7. The provincial average for elementary is 21.7. That's an average class size. Now, in any average, you're going to find classes with lower, and you're going to find classes with higher. Those are the ones I usually hear about, but that happens. That's just, we're going to find anomalies. We're going to find lower numbers and higher numbers. Junior high, I know this is going to surprise you, but our junior high provincial average is 20.7. That's an average, the average class size provincially. In senior high, the average class size is 20.4. Now those are provincials. So the average class size in the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board for elementary is 23.6, a little bit above. In junior high in Annapolis, it's 21.7. And senior high, it's 20.4. Now, you're the Cape Breton Victoria, the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board. Your average size for your board for elementary is 20.4. Your average in Cape Breton Victoria Regional School for junior high is 16.7. And your senior high, your average in your board is 22.6. In Chignecto Central Regional School Board, the average class size in elementary for their board is 21.7, close to the average for the provincial one. The average for the junior is 21.8, and their average class size at the senior high level is 19.2. We have a French school board, which is provincial, and as you know, that there's schools throughout the province. In elementary, their average class size is 17.8. Their junior high is 18.7, and their senior high, those numbers are lower, and they use virtual school a lot to connect with each other, is 12.8. The Halifax Regional School Board, their average for elementary is 22.5, junior 22.2, and senior 23.5. The South Shore Regional School Board for elementary is 21.2. Their junior is 19.3. The average class size in the South Shore Regional School Board for a senior high is 15.3. Strait Regional School Board, elementary 20.9, junior high 18.4, and senior high 16. And Tri-County Regional School Board, elementary 19.9, junior 21.3, and senior 18.5. So I've given you the provincial averages, and those are average class sizes for each of the board. So when I talk about low class size numbers, that's the data, and that's based on information coming from every school board. Those are the average class sizes in the province right now. So thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
We're also hearing that you're going to increase the class size from 27 to 29 for the elementary school system. Is that right? Do you think there's a need with those numbers? Then you're talking about declining enrollment, and why would the need be there if that's the case?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you. You said that was the last question last time. But you know what? I'm so glad to be able to answer that, because I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding. We have low class size, average class sizes in the province, and you're absolutely right. Like, why would we move the cap up? It is actually a mechanism for principals to give them more flexibility around making class compositions. I was in a school, I think it was out in Porters Lake, and I was talking to the principal, and I asked this of every principal: how many children? How many children you have in primary? How many you have in one? Because, you know, I've got the provincial averages, but I want to know what it looks like on the ground. Because as I said, some classes will have lower and some will have higher. So she gave me the number for, I can't remember exactly which class it was, but I do know that the lower elementary class sizes were under 20, the primary ones. But then she gave me a number that I thought was interesting. It was quite a high class number, and I looked at her. I think it was 31 in a, I think it might have been a 3 or 4, grade 3 or 4, and I looked at her, and then she said, I said, well, how is it working out? How are things? And she goes, well, she said, in terms of knowing the students, the composition of the class, the learning styles and needs, principals know their children and teachers know their children. It just gives flexibility for principals to move classes around. And if the cap is there, if the cap is in place, then they don't have the flexibility. So it's just actually was something that provides the opportunity for boards to have flexibility for their principals who know the students, know the needs of the students, to formulate their classes. So in some cases, you might see a school that has a very low number in one class and a higher number in another, and you go, well, that's not fair. How come that teacher only gets to teach 18 and this teacher gets to teach 29, when actual fact that the class with the lower one might be the most challenging class, and that's the opportunity that raising the cap has provided. It's not to say fill the class to the brim before you start the next one. It's actually a flexibility, the offering of a flexibility for principals to design their classrooms. So if it was in place, and that was something that was asked of us, if it's in place, it just ties your hands a bit. And principals know their students, and especially, I was speaking earlier, we're providing 2 principals with the ability to take an instructional leadership course and providing more instructional leadership in schools. Principals know the students, they know families too, that's the other thing, especially principals that have been in a school for a significant amount of time, really have a good sense, and they also take information from the teachers, and also within school too is helpful in designing classes. So when I talked with this principal about how things were going, because I was quite surprised at one of the numbers, and she said, it's a dream class. So that was done as for flexibility. We don't want them to fill up and then spill over to the next. That's not the idea of it. It's more of a management tool. Thanks.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you. That concludes my questioning.
The honourable member for Halifax Birch Cove. Sorry, Bedford Birch Cove.
It's okay, I would have told. Thank you. Minister, I just had actually a few questions about Sunnyside Schools in Bedford. It's 3 schools, 3 school locations go together to make up this school. And one of the schools, Waverley Road, has been earmarked for closure by HRSB has not made the decision yet, but it will later this month, probably to close Waverley Road School. The Waverley Road and Fort Sackville are 2 very old schools. Waverley Road, I think, only has 4 classrooms. Fort Sackville has, I believe, 6, no gym, and kids from those 2 schools feed into Eaglewood Elementary, and Eaglewood Elementary is an older school, but not as old as the other 2. It's a 2-story building. You can't get to the 2nd floor if you're disabled. There's no lunch rooms or anything like that. So I just wanted to take a moment here, because I know the capital plan is going to be coming up, and I did want to mention that my kids went to Fort Sackville and Eaglewood, and it's a lovely way to start school in a very small school with just a couple of grades and everything. But the physical plant is aged, tired. The parents were always convinced that there was a mold problem there, although there was testing done, but geez, somehow kids never got sick after they went up to Eaglewood. Anyway, I just did want to bring this school community to your attention, because I know it's on the HRSB list, and I know that parents and students in the area would be thrilled with a new school, and certainly it was mentioned during the Imagine Our Schools, sorry. Imagine Our Schools process as a community that did not have the proper facilities, and it's tough to do gym in the interior hallway. So thank you. I just wanted to mention that.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. There's nothing better than a strong advocate for your community, and I have to say that you've demonstrated that. I am not familiar with that school or school district, and if the Halifax Regional School Board have that on the list of priorities, then the department will be looking at that. But you bring up a very valid point that we are not only facing enrollment decline, we actually have some buildings that were built quickly because we had a baby boom in the province, which you and I are looking at each other and shaking our heads. Yeah, part of, probably. I know I am. You might not quite fit into that one. But schools were busting at the seams, and a lot of schools were built quickly and not actually the most attractive things in the, and they are pretty tired and institutional looking. In the Annapolis Valley, 4 schools were built all at the same time. They're all identical to meet the needs that we had of that baby boom. Some of the schools can be renovated, but as I mentioned earlier this morning, that you have to look at a school, is it worth it even to renovate when you can consolidate and provide a new school with new space with a building ready for 21st century learning. So I know that Halifax has been quick off the mark. Their report is in at the department, I think. I think Halifax is in. Halifax is in, yeah, and I actually, to tell you the truth, because I've been dealing with this, I haven't had the opportunity to look at it, but that really sits in the hands of the department and the engineers, and we'll see. So I don't know where it is on their priority, but we're looking at all boards' priorities. So definitely, there's an opportunity to provide students with consolidated school, but there has to be work done with the board, with the community, to make sure that that's what the community is looking for. So you said it was part of Imagine Our Schools, and yeah, we're asking at the education, with the Kids and Learning First, we're asking school boards to look at their schools regionally, to come back with exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about schools that are tired, past their, and we also, and meeting the needs of our students in the 21st century. If they do a more regional approach, it's coming up with options based on a region, as opposed to looking at one school at a time. So that model is being worked on within the department to roll out to some of the boards, because we're using the model that another board has already been using. Engaging the community well before a school would ever go on a list for review. And then the review process still stays in place, but before a school goes on to a review list, the community has been already very well aware of why the school has gone on that list, and then the next process starts. So thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. I do think parents, I participated in the Imagine Our Schools process, and at that time, it was pretty clear to us what they were saying, which was, that these 3 schools, 2 of which are very small and very old, would amalgamate. And some parents won't like that because they like the little schools, and it's a nice way to start out. But everyone knows what the expectation is, so I don't think it would come as a huge shock or anything like that. And with that, I will finish my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I think we're winding down in estimates and education, but Madam Minister, I do have a few questions in particular around some of the areas that in the area that I represent and the families that I represent, in regards to the replacement school for Charles P. Allen High, which is located in Bedford, but the people of Hammonds Plains feed into that school. And as I know you're aware, the school has been slated to the beams are up. I was driving down there the other day, and the site is getting prepared, and it's going to be an absolute beautiful 21st century high school. And I know the member for Bedford Birch Cove and myself have gone to many meetings and many events with the people that we represent, and people are very excited about the school. There's always hiccups along the way, we know that. And there's always going to be parents and individuals who will, advocate on behalf of their community, and that certainly has transpired throughout this process. So I guess my question, another comment, quick before I go to my question, is. I know one of the anomalies that we see from rural Nova Scotia is that, declining population, but out the area that we represent, we're seeing an increase in population, and we're going to start seeing that, I know, through the subdivision of Bedford West, and certainly out my way in Hammonds Plains, the area is just growing like nonstop. New streets popping up every time I go to a different area. There's new streets. So I guess my question is, first is, do you know when this school in particular was approved? Or first, when was it requested by the school board, and when was it approved to be constructed? And yeah, thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
We're going to get the data around that, but I just want to make a comment about this school. Oh, thank you. The school was approved in 2009, and it will be opening in 2013. But I want to make a comment about this school. This is going to be a wonderful school for the community. There's been a lot of time, care, and expertise around creating space in this school to meet the needs of students in the 21st century. Now, there have been a few hiccups along the way, but each and every one of those has been met appropriately and with expertise from TIR and from our facilities manager, Daryl McDonald. I have to say that working with Daryl on this particular project has been actually extremely exciting. He had the opportunity, he and the engineer from TIR, to brief the member opposite and I around this project. It's incredible, the amount of care and deliberation to use every piece appropriately. And even when the bedrock of Bedford, we should call it Flintstone High, the bedrock of Bedford and all of to get the site ready provided some challenges, and the design actually created a little bit of some interesting space in the design in the school, which they've utilized appropriately and to provide extra space in the school for storage. So for sports, all the sports things, because I remember in my own school, you know, you open up this dusty equipment room and get the mats out or get the balls out, and then in behind the stage you're storing your trestles and all of that for gymnastics, and it's then you hoist up stuff and hang it from the ceiling. This one's going to have appropriate space to store those things. So that's one of those things that the engineers were able to design in that. Looking at space, classroom space and learning space, there's more than adequate space for all kinds of learning in the school. So I mean, I know we have to wait. It's starting, we can see it now from the road. It's pretty exciting, but I know everyone is waiting with anticipation until those doors open for the students. So it's a pretty exciting time in Bedford Hammonds Plains on this project. So thank you.
The Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, I asked that question about when it was approved. It's because I remember the date very well. I think it was the day or two before the election was called in 2009 that this school would be promised, and or a week anyways. But it's good, and I'm glad to see that we've moved forward with the project, because I remember a leaflet that went out from my progressive conservative counterpart or candidate, who said, if you vote for Matt Wynot, the school would not be built. So I'm glad to see.
Order, please. I would remind the member that you're not to use proper names for members of the House of Assembly.
My own name.
Even your own name. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm glad that you're always keeping me in line. But yes, so it's one of those things. My other question is, I wanted to make another comment too around the partnerships that this school, and I think all schools, try to bring together, and partnerships being from the municipal level, obviously from the Department of Education, the boards, and TIR. I mean, those are, in this school in particular, I know HRM is enhancing the school, and the taxpayers of HRM through municipal taxes are also paying for enhancements in the school, which I think really that whole area with the BMO Center, the 4-pad as it's known, the new school with the nursing home that's out that way, the new Bedford West area, it's really going to be a hub for the Bedford and Hammonds Plains. I think that it's going to really start to bring people together, which I think in the past the two communities weren't necessarily coming together, and I think this is something that's a positive step forward. So the partnerships I see are good, and of course you mentioned about Daryl McDonald, who has been a great asset to the department and to this whole project and all of the schools that are being built across the province. I want to thank him personally for all of the work that he has done. 2 questions. Is the school on time, and is it on budget?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. At this point, everyone cross their fingers. Things are going well. But as everyone knows, we cannot ever predict what might happen. I look at everything was going really well down in Yarmouth. And that could have been a catastrophe. We are just absolutely blessed that no one was hurt or killed in that accident that happened at Yarmouth. And for members that don't know what happened in that new construction, they were building it in interesting ways of technology, but the whole wall was constructed, and then they lifted up with a crane, and then it placed it in, I suppose, I hope no engineers listening to me, the support system, and it's not built like a house is. It's actually built in these already built walls, and a crane was lifting the wall into the supports, and a passerby happened to think, that's a really amazing piece of technology that I'm watching, and stopped and filmed on a cell phone, and just doing a little clip just to, say, look what I saw on the way home from work. And as they're filming, the whole thing, the crane fell over. The crane, the weight of it, the crane fell over, the wall went down, and it's horrifying because it was brought to my attention within a few minutes of this posting, what had happened, and there's a person scurrying away. I mean, it was so close. It was, anyway, that whole project now is delayed because of that and also weather concerns. So everyone keep their fingers crossed. Everything seems to be working out okay. Now, you asked about the budget allocation. It's important that when we have a budget that we stick to it. I mean, that's how families have to operate, that's how government has to operate. But very early on in the process, Bedford decided to have a lot of bedrock. And the site that was, the site that is the most appropriate site, actually when they went in to actually do the work, it needed to have some work. So we had to add $3 million extra to the budget early on because the site needed that much work. They actually had to blast bedrock to get the site fixed. So at this point, with that was approved. We approved that based on that situation. Things seem to be going okay. We're asking all of our partners to be very mindful of, we have a budget and that's what we need to work with. There's going to be fantastic things that are in that school. It's designed to meet the needs of up to 1,600 students. I don't think that's how many people are going to be enrolled in the school, but that's the learning space is designed for that. It has wonderful facilities in the school, and because of the partnerships with HRM, it's going to be fantastic for the community and for team sports, and this is going to be the hub it's going to be a new hub for the Bedford Hammonds Plains area. It's a fabulous process. This is a project that, again, I have to go back to our engineers that work on these projects. They are excited about it. There's been some challenges, and they've actually, for the want of a better word, I think they really have enjoyed those challenges. It's amazing and humbling to watch how hard our civil servants work on behalf of Nova Scotia. Thank you.
Member for Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other thing that I think is exciting about the school is I saw that some of the design work and the whole teacher prep area and different areas throughout the school that will be in existence for for teachers, but also the common area, because when I went to St. Mary's, I remember thinking this is kind of a neat concept where you can actually go and work in the hallways with desks and all the rest of it. But this is kind of what it's going to look like at the new high school, which I think is exciting. I guess another question I had, I know that you mentioned earlier about the issues that we had with the site selection and that sort of thing that came forward early on in the process. I guess, has there ever been any consideration around, I know that there was a site selection committee who, members of the community, members of government, school boards. Has there been any consideration put into the idea that the price of the land should come into play when the community puts forward an idea for a site? It's just because, I mean, yes, of course, that was the ideal site, but then, of course, and we knew that it was the best site, but then government had to do, of course, do its due diligence. Government had to do its due diligence in ensuring that that was the best site for the overall global picture. So the idea around changing the process to ensure that money and the price tag of the land is put into play before the final decision is made by the province and by the school board. Can you just comment quickly on that? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. It's very important that we are fiscally responsible, and we do need to look at the costs of site selection process, and that is now factored in site selection. I just want to go over how sites are chosen in the province of Nova Scotia for a school. Once the school board identifies the need for a new school, it's on their priority list and has been approved by Treasury Board, but approved to move forward from the department, then goes to Treasury Board, and Treasury Board approves that, and we've got a project ready to go. Then it's up to the school board to have a site selection. And so the site, now different school boards do it in maybe different ways, but it's all to the same end, is that they form a committee worked on site selection. Government, Department of Education or TIR are not involved in that site selection process. That is something that's done at the school board level. Then but by legislation, I think, or regulation, it's one legislation or regulation, there has to be 3 identified sites come to the Department of Education, and then they are vetted through TIR, and maybe in, as I mentioned earlier this morning, the Department of Environments, depending on what the sites are. So all 3 sites then are investigated and evaluated very rigorously. And then what comes to the desk of the Minister of Education is a full report on each of the sites. So TIR has, if it's this site, and it lists the pros, the cons, and then it gives an evaluation with pictures too, by the way. It's a very interesting document to read. All 3 sites then are vetted through with recommendations, and then the engineers actually provide the minister some suggestions or recommendations based on, and that's why the site in Amherst, actually, recommendations from the environment and from TIR said they were not suitable for the school. So they had to go back and start that process again. But we asked for 3, and then they would come to the department. Then the minister looks at the 3 and makes the final decision on where it is. Now, in part of that process now, cost of the site is now included in the evaluation process because, as you know, you don't want to spend any more money on the land than is absolutely necessary, and so we want good quality land, of course, and we want the schools in the appropriate place, but we do have to also make sure that the taxpayers of Nova Scotia are getting that money in the school and not paying for very, very, very expensive land. So it's part of the evaluation, but it's a very rigorous process based on the school board, committee, Then the information is vetted through TIR, through all of their engineers. A full report comes to the minister, and then the minister makes a decision based on the recommendations from engineers. Thank you.
The honourable member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that, Madam Minister. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the area schools that I'm glad to represent. And actually yesterday I had a call from the local principal from one of the schools, and he just wanted to have a chat just to kind of give me kind of how things are going in the school and that sort of thing. So I thought, you know, I hadn't heard from many of the principals in my area recently, so I thought this morning I'd give them all a call and have a chat. And one of the, again, I mentioned that the Hammonds Plains side of my constituency is growing immensely. Then we have the Sackville side of the constituency, where in fact the Minister from Communities, Culture and Heritage, in fact, his area is shrinking. You know, for instance, I know a lot of members from the Halifax Regional School Board have mentioned the Imagine Our Schools process that took place there in the last, before 2009. And one of the things that was cited in that report was around Millwood High School. Now, Millwood High School, as you know, was a school that was built when the community of Sackville was growing more than it is today. Sackville High was bursting at the seams. Fall River didn't have a high school, so they were, Fall River didn't have a high school, so they were bringing in the kids from Beaverbank. So Millwood High, of course, was built to take in some of the kids from Beaverbank, but then Beaverbank, the new Lockview High that was built, which is a P3 school, took the kids from Beaverbank. So now Millwood only has one junior high feeder school. And one of the things that we're seeing is that Millwood High, every year after year, their population is decreasing. And over the next couple of years, that school will actually reach the lowest that it's ever been, which will be under 500 kids. That will be by 2018, 2019. When I spoke to the principal there today, he mentioned to me that their projections for next year will be around 550. So one of the things that we're facing in that school is that the population is going down, and they're not necessarily able to deliver all of the programs, say, a larger high school would be able to have. So I guess my question is, what sort of things can be done for students who may want to take a course that may not be offered at their school to allow them to have those opportunities in maybe a school that may not have the population to have, I think out of hand, when I went to high school, we didn't necessarily, I remember some of the people who were political geeks, we wanted to have a political science class, but we didn't have enough students who wanted to take it. So what sort of things can we do, or what is the province doing to ensure that kids can get those things that they want to get and those credits?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. Before I answer the question, I just want to reiterate that we're asking school boards to look at schools regionally and pick up these shifts in population and work with the community around challenges and opportunities around the shift that we're finding. And, our rural areas, we're finding that we're losing a population. You're describing a situation, gaining it in one and losing it in another. It's that ebb and flow, but mostly it's not, we're losing mostly in the rural area. But we have recognized that if you're in a high school in Nova Scotia and the population goes to a certain number, it's very difficult to be able to provide all of the same courses. So if we're in a rural area, now yours is a suburban area, we don't want our students in these smaller high schools to miss out on any opportunity that any child in a school that has a larger population. So one of the things is that if your school, if a child in the school would like to have an IB program, they have the ability to go to a local high school close to them but they would have to provide their own transportation. So we don't want anybody in our smaller schools to miss out on an IB program. So I don't know if that school has an IB. If they had an IB, they'd keep IB and children could come. But one of the things is that under the funding formula, that's one of the revisions that was undertaken around the revision of the HOG formula, was the fact that school boards tell us that it's harder to, of course, keep staff at schools that are that have less students. So under the formula, we're providing more full-time equivalent teachers over the formula. It's in the formula now around a small high school. So the small isolated school and also small high school are now in the formula. We have 98 schools that are categorized under that. But I think that one of the things, as everyone is probably tired of me talking about, that I'm absolutely loving, is the fact that students in every school in high school now can take a credit outside of the school, a personal development credit. So every student in that school should be encouraged to be a part of some sort of a leadership program or do some kind of cooperative work in the community, like with the SPCA or the food bank. And Anne's department's been working on that framework. We're extremely excited about that, because when children are motivated with their outside activities and connected into their community, it benefits them. But the one that I think that is really going to meet the needs of every student in a small high school, to get those very highly specialized courses with a teacher that has the expertise, is our virtual high school. So if you have somebody in that school, a small group of children that want to take advanced chemistry, for example, they can, using the virtual technology, which is a real teacher, real time, somewhere in the province, and the children working together in a classroom with their computers. It's online but live. It's a real person. It's live time. So that is, we're going to make sure that our high school kids get what they need, even though their schools are getting smaller. So we're providing funding to the board to help them with full-time equivalents, but we're also providing virtual high. But I also am very interested in students recognizing that we're going to have them have the opportunity for that outside work that they're doing, if it's cadets or 4-H, that they can use that as one of their high school credits. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further members offering questions, I would now offer the Honourable Minister of Education the opportunity for some concluding remarks and to move her estimates.
I gotta find them.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would like to take this moment to say a few closing remarks. And they did provide me notes, but I think that I would, from the bottom of my heart, I would actually like to look at the members opposite to thank them very much for the engaging conversations that we've had around the important issues around education. I hope that, that people here recognize my commitment to education and how much of a passion it is to me, and how hard we are working as a government to make sure that we are providing opportunities for every child in the province to be successful. And there's a few things I do need to get back to some members from yesterday around some of our line items, but if any member at any time, and I think that the members opposite know that I sincerely mean this, that if there's any information that you need from the Department of Education or from me, please feel free to approach me at any time on those, and we'll get the information that you need, or if you have a concern that you need to bring to my attention, I'm there for you to come to. Please don't hesitate in any way.